Good evening, or good afternoon. It's not evening yet, and forgive me for hunching over the microphone like some, I don't know what noun to use, microphone huncher. It's just that I have laryngitis, and I know you wouldn't hear me if I didn't hunch. We're in for a very special afternoon at the 2018 John S. Nuveen Lecture at the Divinity School. If you didn't know you were at the Divinity School, that is where you are. Who was John Nuveen? John Nuveen was one of Chicago's most influential business leaders and an active civil and cultural leader with ties to many educational institutions. At the University of Chicago, he served as a trustee, as chairman of the university's Alumni Association, and most importantly, from the point of view of this building, as a trustee of the Baptist Theological Union, whose trustees are present here today, and the lecture is always held in conjunction with one of the annual meetings of the BTU's gatherings, trustees. The BTU established the Nuveen Lecture in his honor in 1972, one among the many, many wonderful things they've done for the Divinity School. Each year, a member of the university's faculty, generally not a member of the Divinity School, is invited by the BTU and the Divinity School to deliver the Nuveen Lecture. I won't mention the past lectures. I will only say that for some of the past lectures, certainly for me, giving this lecture has been an intellectually transforming and defining experience. So today I'm honored to welcome Wu Hong, the Harrie Vanderstappen Distinguished Service Professor in Chinese Art History, Director of the Center for the Art of East Asia, and Consulting Curator of the Smart Museum of Art. And those are just his roles, some of his roles here at the university. Wu Hong has spent his career helping to create the field of modern and contemporary Chinese art history in higher education. His list of scholarly works is long and varied. He's published widely on both traditional and, I'm not sure traditional is the right word, but and contemporary art, as well as having curated many exhibitions around the world. It's difficult to exaggerate his influence on the reception of contemporary Chinese art in North America, in Europe, and in China. He has more or less created that field, not only in art history, but also in museum collections across the world. It is for that work that this year he received the Distinguished Scholar Award from the College Art Association, the highest honor from the world's largest professional association of art historians and artists. He also works to preserve early Chinese art, and I think this is how I first met you. His work with the Center for the Art of East Asia, which he founded in 2003, supports scholarship and creates digital technologies to advance access to and preserve art and artistic sites. For example, he's used digital imaging and 3D technology to map ancient Buddhist caves pillaged in the early 20th century by foreign collectors. His team spent years identifying and locating various fragments, scattered pieces around the world, making 3D scans, and then building 3D imaging of the entire cave, offering these images to scholars and to you in an online database. You can get a sense of the breadth of his interests merely from the titles of a few of his recent books: Zooming In, Histories of Photography in China; The Art of the Yellow Springs, Understanding Chinese Tombs, both from the University of Chicago Press. Other major work include Remaking Beijing, Tiananmen Square and the Creation of a Political Space; The Double Screen, Medium and Representation in Chinese Paintings; Transients, Chinese Experimental Art at the End of the 20th Century, and I could name many others. His interest in both the traditional and contemporary art of China has led him to experiment with different ways to integrate these conventionally separate phases into new kinds of art historical narratives, exploring the interrelationship between art medium, pictorial image, and architectural space, the dialectical relationship between absence and presence in Chinese art and visual culture, and the relationship between art discourse and practice. Now a list of honors, only partial. An elected member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and the American Philosophical Society. Wu Hong sits on the boards and advisory committees of many research institutes and museums in the US and China. He's also a celebrated teacher, having received the Distinguished Teaching Award from the College Art Association of America, as well as the University of Chicago's own Faculty Award for Excellence in Graduate Teaching. And this year, he will be delivering the 68th annual Andrew W. Mellon Lectures at the National Gallery of Art. The series of 6 lectures, entitled End is Beginning, Chinese Art and Dynastic Time, promises to be a thrilling intellectual event, and I urge you to fly to DC for each of the 6 lectures. But today you can experience the same thrill here in the comfort of Hyde Park. His talk today is entitled Miraculous Icons and Dynastic Time, Narrating Buddhist Images in Medieval China. Please join me in welcoming Wu Hong.
Thank David for this very kind introduction, and thank you for coming. And to thank Deep School for inviting me to give this very important lecture. And in the spirit of the lecture series, and in the tradition of this university, I take this opportunity as a chance to exchange my study with many colleagues, many students here. So I will talk about an ongoing project, basically, is written there. So this talk is a part of a larger project on narratives of Chinese art. So first is narratives of Chinese art and their relationships with actual artistic production. Our former colleague in this university, Paul Ricoeur, once wrote that, I quote, "The world unfolded by every narrative work is always a temporal world," unquote. The most powerful and lasting temporal framework in narrating Chinese art has been dynastic time, which organizes historical information and channels the historical imagination in a linear fashion through successive dynasties from the 3rd millennium BCE to 20th century CE. This narrative mode first emerged in the 4th century BCE, when ancient ritual objects and monuments were written about for the first time. More than 1,000 years later, when Zhang Yanyuan wrote the first comprehensive narrative of Chinese art in the 9th century, he explicitly titled it Famous Paintings of Successive Dynasties, 历代名画记. The same mode of dynastic time continues to dominate our understanding of Chinese art. A glance at the tables of contents in recent introductions to Chinese art immediately reveals this fact. You see that one, you cannot see probably, a table content of a very popular book by Michael Sullivan. So basically every chapter is a dynasty. So deep-rooted is this temporal order in Chinese art history that it seems to have become self-evident and natural as a priori and shared chronology that escapes historical inquiry. As a result, although the field of Chinese art produces huge amounts of scholarship every year, there has been little reflection on the nature of this temporal framework and its role in both the discourse and the practice of Chinese art. So my recent research project tries to develop this reflection around a series of questions. For example, how did dynastic time emerge and permeate writings on traditional Chinese art over the past 3,000 years? How did it constantly enrich and redefine itself in specific historical contexts? How did it interact with other temporalities in different historical, religious, and political systems? How did narratives became how the narratives based on such dynastic time both responded to and inspired actual artistic creation. These are some large questions. My talk today will provide a case study to think about these questions. I will discuss two types of narrative representation of Buddhist icons from medieval China, one textual and one pictorial. My first task is to uncover dynastic time in these narratives, which are mostly religious biographies and miracle tales, and are not directly related to dynastic history at the first glance. I will demonstrate that their subject and narrative scheme betray certain patterns rooted in the concept of dynastic time, and that these patterns in turn inspire the making of actual works of art. I will discuss three related groups of materials. The first two groups consist of textual information provided by two monastic authors, Huijiao and Dao Quan, in the early 6th and early 7th centuries, respectively. The last group is comprised of a set of late 7th century murals in Mogao Cave, 332, one of the surviving cave chapels at Dunhuang in northwest China. Let's see. Okay, that's my first. Huijiao's account of a miraculous image. Huijiao is the first Chinese author to write on miraculous Buddhist icons as semblance. He was a native of the south and spent his whole life there, mainly during the reign of the southern Liang dynasty in the early half of 6th century. His Lives of Eminent Monks, Gaozeng Zhuan, records life events of 257 outstanding monks from the 1st century to his own times. Among them, monk Huida stands out as a singular seeker of Buddhist holy icons and discoverer of buried relics. Huida acquired this passion after a life-changing experience. In Huijiao's account, Huida was born with the name Liu Sahe at Lishi, Shanxi in northwest China. As a young man, he loved to hunt, but this was changed by a miraculous event when he turned 31. During a deep coma that year, he traveled to the underworld and witnessed the horrors of hell. There, he also met his former teacher in a previous life, who ordered him to take Buddhist vows and make a pilgrimage to the south to search for sacred monuments of Ashoka, the famous Indian king who was said to have built 84,000 stupas in a vast region to spread the Buddhist faith. Following this instruction, the reborn Huida, or reborn Liu Sahe, now the monk Huida, went to the lower Yangtze River region on his religious mission. From this point on, Huijiao's account changes its focus from the man to Buddhist icons and monuments. Huida found the first miraculous icon in a temple called the Chang'an Temple in Jiankang, the capital of the eastern Jin, in the present-day Nanjing. He arrived there in the Ningkang reign between 373 and 375 AD. Standing on the city wall and gazing around, he saw a strange light radiating from this particular temple. After locating the origin of the light and worshiping the place, he conducted an archaeological expedition to find 3 nesting reliquaries under stone tablets, made respectively of iron, silver, and gold. The innermost one contained the relics of the Buddha that included the Holy One's fingernail and a thread of curly hair. Curly hair is very important here. The relics were believed to have been originally stored under a pagoda there that Ashoka had built in the time of King Jin of the Zhou dynasty in China's antiquity. Since the ancient pagoda had long disappeared, Huida transferred the relics to a new pagoda, which Emperor Xiao of the Eastern Jin expanded to 3 stories in 391 CE. The icon in this temple, Chang'an Temple, also originated in India, but had gone through a series of complex events in China before reaching this final stop. This legend actually is illustrated in the Dunhuang Cave, which I will discuss later today. I will give you a preview of some images while telling this story. It is said that Gao Kui, the magistrate of Danyang, found the statue in a river during the Xianhe era, that's 326 to 334. Xianhe era of the Eastern Jin. I don't know if you can see it. Basically, it's here. The other picture found this statue in marshland, actually. So the statue's base and the halo were missing, but a Sanskrit inscription on the image disclosed that it was made by King Ashoka. When the statue was being moved back to town, the bull pulling the cart ignored the driver's order and walked directly to Chang'an Temple. Other miracles followed. 2 years later, a fisherman found the statue's missing lotus base made of gold floating on the sea. 5 foreign monks that arrived, claiming that a dream had led them there to find the statue, which they had brought from India to China, but had lost its track of it after the fall of the Western Jin capital, Ye. I will explain this later. They cried with joy at seeing the statue, which radiated in response. Its light brightened the dark temple hall. Finally, the missing halo of the Buddha was found on the bottom of the ocean in 371. Emperor Jianwen donated it to the temple and turned out to fit the statue perfectly. 2 other events in Huijiao's account follow a similar narrative pattern. First, Huida's discovery of another Ashoka pagoda in a city called Huaiji. And his second is a visit to a pair of stone statues. These stone statues also came from India, traveled to China on their own from India to China in 313. So there's a number of events in Huijiao's this account, basically following this pattern. Right? This brief summary shows some basic narrative patterns related to time and place. Most significantly, the Buddhist icons and monuments are framed not within 1 or 2, but within 3 overlapping temporal spatial schemes. One is related to their foreign origins, either having traveled to China from India or having been constructed by a foreign monarch. The erroneous dating of Ashoka to the Zhou dynasty emphasized the remoteness of these holy relics. So the idea is really from far away, from the remote past, so it's enormous, like a big temporal spatial scheme. A second temporal spatial scheme is centered on a special event, the fall of the Western Jin and the founding of the Eastern Jin in China's history. Here I should provide some background information. The Western Jin or Jin Dynasty united China in 280 and established its capital Yecheng in North China in Luoyang. But shortly thereafter, the country fell into chaos. A host of non-Chinese regimes occupied the north. The Jin royal house retreated to the southeast and re-established their capital in Jiankang in 317. So the second half of the Jin dynasty is known as the Eastern Jin. This event has a pivotal significance in Huijiao's stories of the miraculous icons. We have learned that the gold statue in the Chang'an temple was first brought by the 5 foreign monks to the Western Jin capital, but suddenly disappeared when the capital fell and then reappeared in the south. As well, the 2 stone statues that Huida visited in the Tongxuan temple, Huijiao's text says that because the Western Jin was about to fall, the statues traveled by water to the mouth of the Wusong River in the south. So implying that the icons had miraculously detected the forthcoming collapse of the Western Jin and hence steered their course directly to the new capital. The third temporal spatial scheme in Huijiao's account is centered on Huida's southern expedition in 370s. A few years before his visit, the last missing piece of the gold Buddha in the Chang'an temple had been found. And with the Eastern Jin's emperor's blessing, was reunited with the statue. Huida himself discovered 2 Ashoka pagodas as well as the Buddha's relics. The ruined pagodas were rebuilt and further expanded by the Eastern emperor in 391, the last date mentioned in the account. It seems clear now that these 3 temporal spatial schemes work together to support a political claim. Through identifying the South as the center of Buddhism, it was there that the most ancient Chinese relics, most ancient Buddhist relics and monuments were found and honored by the Eastern Jin rulers. This claim is reinforced by Huida's own biography. Although he spent his first 30 years in the north, he was directed by divine guidance to the south to visit true Buddhist images and monuments with direct connections to India, which he subsequently discovered in a small area centered on the Eastern Jin capital in the lower Yangtze region. The story of the gold statue in Chang'an temple implies an even deeper or maybe more direct political significance. When it first traveled to the south, its incomplete state served as an allegory for the country's splitting up. Reassembling its missing sections in the south, that symbolized the Eastern Jin's mandate to reunite the country, although it never happened. Let's move to the second section. Another monastic author, Dao Xuan's account of the miraculous Buddha statue at Fanhe, a particular place. Huijiao's account of Huida's southern pilgrimage ends with the sentence, I quote, "We lost his traces afterwards." That's the ending of the previous biography. But no longer after Huijiao died in 554, another biography of Huida appeared in the north. This version had little to do with Huida's activities in the south. In his continuous lives of eminent monks, Xu Gaozheng Zhuan, the famous early Tang monk author Dao Xuan omitted Huida's entire southern journey by simply referring the reader to the previous biography, 前传 by Huijia. Instead, he informed readers about what happened to Huida after he returned to the north in 420, which coincided with the final year of the Eastern Jin. Seems the Eastern Jin fell, couldn't unite China again, and finally he missed 420, and that very year, this Meng Huida also returned to the north. A lot of coincidence. It is said that when Huida was traveling to the northwest en route to the city of Liangzhou, can you see there? Yes. It's basically travel supposedly from Diankang all the way to Liangzhou, not far from Zhongzhou. So according to Dao Xuan's this new biography. So en route to Liangzhou, he stopped at a place called Fanhe in present-day Gansu province. There, facing Mount Yu, in the distance, he bowed and predicted that a miraculous Buddha statue would emerge from the mountain cliffs in the future. He told his followers, should its wondrous appearance be complete, then people will be happy and the world will be peaceful. But if some parts of the statue are missing, then the world will be in turmoil and people will suffer. That's his prediction. This prophecy turned out to be Huida's last words. He fell into a gorge not long after. His bones were smashed to pieces as tiny as sunflower seeds. Someone strung the fragment bones together and left them in the hand of a Buddha statue in an old temple near the gorge. So he became relics. Clearly, a different spatial temporal framework separates this new account from the old one. Not only does it relocate Huida to the north, but more importantly, it reorients his temporality. In the southern account, Huida's significance lay completely in his relationship with the past. His pilgrimage itself the result of past events in his life, i.e. his false death, led him to discover ruins and relics. In the northern account, however, his significance lay completely in his relationship with the future. Here he is no longer a Buddhist archaeologist searching for relics and ruins, but has become a prophet who left his words to be fulfilled and his own relics to be worshipped by later people. Following this new direction, Dao Xuan, our author, recorded Huida's prophecy of the Fanhe statue as the only event in the monk's life, but devoted the remaining part and the far larger part of the biography to the statue's manifestations after Huida's death. In other words, the principal protagonist of the biography is no longer Huida, but the statue. There are obvious connections between this statue and the holy icons that Huida visited in the south, as they were all conceived as miraculous images, able to act of their own accord. But instead of gaining its meaning from its Indian origin, the Fanhe image was an indigenous icon of the future. It was not even born yet, but would one day thrust itself out, a very powerful image, thrust itself out of a native Chinese mountain. Obviously inspired by the numerous grotto statues created in the north during the 5th and the 6th centuries, this statue was not a fixture of a wooden frame temple inside a city. Instead, a temple would be created in the wilderness to honor it. Dao Xuan reports. Here I want to read part of this biography, basically the story about the statue, because it's very lively and interesting. Some 87 years later, after Dao Xuan, after Hui Da's prophecy, in the first year of Zhen Guang of the Northern Wei, a stone image was thrust out of the mountainside following a great thunderstorm. It was 18 feet high and of marvelous appearance, but with no head. Craftsmen were ordered to choose stone to carve a head, but it fell off as soon as being put on the body. At that time, the Northern Wei dynasty had come to the end, so what the monk had long foretold came true. In the first year of the Northern Zhou, so the first year of the new dynasty, right? In the 7-mile gorge of the east of Liangzhou, where Huida died, a ray of light appeared, shining brightly in darkness. To everyone's amazement, it was from the head of the statue. People took it reverently to the mountainside and installed it on the statue. It fitted the body perfectly. Although the image had been incomplete for over 40 years, and although the body and the head were divided by 200 miles, the two came together when peace arrived in the world. When the miraculous temple, Rixiangsi, was found there in the first year of Baojing, light shone everywhere and sound of bells echoed without cease. No one knows how. So, and still more, sorry. During the beginning of the Jianhe era, the head frequently fell off. The Grand Minister and Prince of Qi came to investigate, and they ordered the head be reinstalled. But all at night it fell off again, just as before. People tried many times and used various materials to make new heads, but all efforts were in vain. Soon afterwards, the Northern Zhou persecuted Buddhism. And this led to the regime's demise 4 years later. Examining this event, intelligent people realized its previous signs in the statue's miraculous manifestations. But in spite of being abolished and abandoned, the image still stood fast. From the beginning of the Kaihong reign of the Sui dynasty, that's another new dynasty, starting from 581. The Buddha face was greatly promoted. The Buddha image was elaborately embellished, and the temple was highly respected. In the 5th year of Da Ye, Emperor Yang visited the temple to pay his respect. With his generous donations, the temple regained its glory and beauty. The emperor changed the name of the temple to Temple of Spiritual Resonance, and ordered the stone image be copied and transmitted. But its precise measurement could never be achieved. Although people agree that it is roughly 18 feet high, each attempt to measure it has produced a different result. This account is a symbolic historical narrative, or say a symbolic historical narrative from a retrospective point of view. The statue witnessed the fall of the Northern Wei, rejected the mandate of Northern Zhou for its persecution of Buddhism, and finally celebrated the victory of the Sui and Tang empires. It is not difficult to see the political agenda implied in this record. Indeed, Dao Xuan, as a spokesman of early Tang Buddhism, was actively involved in political and public affairs and developed close ties with the courts of Emperors Taizong and Gaozong. His works, characterized by a strong synthetic tendency, often transcended the old political boundaries of the North and South. Several enormous encyclopedias compiled by him and his colleagues including the collected records of spiritual response of the three jewels in China, an extended collection of Buddhist writings, and the pearl grove of the Dharma garden. Gather Buddhist miracle tales, gather tears, hagiography from various sources into a unified whole, or unified wholes. Not coincidentally, these three books, all include the story of the Fanhe Buddha statue, as well as Huijiao's account of the sacred images and Huida's visit in the south. These synthetic Buddhist compilations seems to have mirrored the country's political unification under the Tang. This synthetic view is then given a pictorial form in one of the most interesting cave chapels, Dunhuang. So here's my third part and last part. Dunhuang Cave 323 and its pictorial narrative of Chinese Buddhism. Among nearly 500 cave chapels with murals and sculptures that have survived at Dunhuang, I think you all know Dunhuang, so I won't talk about it. Among these 500 surviving cave and temples, Cave 323 is unique in its pictorial program. I have previously suggested that this cave was established in the late 7th century by the followers of Dao Xuan himself. Today, I will only focus on its murals and sculpture, which reflect a systematic effort to construct a history or a pictorial history of Chinese Buddhism based on the concept of miraculous resonance, 感应, and the numinous traces, 灵异, 灵迹, both related to miraculous icons. The cave is of a moderate size with a square chamber about 5.5 meters each side. Like all other Dunhuang caves, it faces east, so the niche on the west wall defines its focus. The sculpture inside the niche were reconfigured in later times, but the Tang Dynasty murals on the three other walls remain untouched. On the north and south walls, flanking the central niche, two ultra-long compositions appear above two rows of large bodhisattvas. Scholars have termed these murals as paintings of Buddhist history or narrative illustrations of miraculous resonances. These two appellations actually indicate two parallel yet intertwined themes of the murals. On the one hand, their narrative sequence follows the order of Chinese dynasties, and their human protagonists were found in transmitted historical record. On the other hand, most of the stories in the two murals illustrated instances of miraculous resonances and numinous traces, and hence gave out a strong flavor of religious mysticism. Such a blending of historical and super-historical dimensions betrays a particular conceptualization of history at the time and exemplify a corresponding narrative mode. Let me first briefly introduce the content of the murals. Designed as a continuous pictorial narrative, the two murals comprise a vast panorama that sprouts out on a coherent landscape background. So although there are different stories, there is a coherent landscape background. You can see the mountains, rivers, so as if a huge picture. Each mural is internally divided into a number of frames, And there are altogether 7 frames, 4 on the north wall and 3 on the south wall. Each frame has 1 or 2 central characters, whether historical figures, miraculous images, or a numinous site. The historical narrative starts from the west wall of the north wall. West end of the north wall starts from the, so here is the west end, start north wall, we're going down. So start from here, west end of north wall. And then restarts from the west end of the south wall and concludes at the east end. The designer was apparently well-versed in Buddhist literature since he inserted lengthy inscriptions in rectangular cartouches in the paintings, providing precise explanation for the illustrated historical events. So probably you can see all these square cartouches, those are inscriptions. So very long, very unique uniform, very special. The first frame in the narrative cycle depicts an event allegedly taking place in the 2nd century BCE. Here we see Emperor Wu of the Western Han paying homage to 2 golden statues which he obtained after a victorious war against the Huns. He placed them in the Gantian Palace and made offerings to them, but he didn't know what gods these statues represented. So he sent Zhang Tian to the western region to find it out. The lower scene in the picture shows Zhang Tian kneeling in front of Emperor Wu to receive the order. The emperor rides on a horse under a canopy. The upper left scene shows Zhang in the kingdom of Bactria, where he learned that the 2 golden men were statues of the Buddha. The legend depicted here didn't take its final textual form until the mid-6th century. So Dao Xuan then cited it in his writings as one of the key events that marked the moment when Buddhism reached China. Continuing the narrative thread of Zhang Tian's expedition, the next frame represents the legends related to a sacred pond in Bactria, where the Buddha washed his monastic robe after achieving enlightenment. The following frame leads the viewer back to China, where the Central Asian monk Fo Tu Deng performed miracles in front of Shihu, the ruler of the latter Zhao, from 334 to 349 CE. In one place in the picture, Fo Tu Deng turns wine into a thunderstorm to put out a fire in a faraway city. That's pretty clear in the middle, right? That's the monk and produce rain that fire in this faraway city. So that's a major event here. In another place, he makes prophecy through listening to the chiming of bells on a pagoda. A third image portrays him sitting on a riverbank to wash his own intestines. I don't have a detail, but it's sort of here. He's sitting, washing his internal organs. The fourth scene, at the lower right corner, contrasts Fo Tu Deng's genuine magic with the phony devotion of heretics, whose fake stupa fell apart when King Ashoka bowed to it. So there's real magic, there's fake magic, a real pagoda, real stupa, fake pagoda, stupas. The last frame on the north wall illustrates the deeds of another famous miracle worker, the Sabian monk Kang Seng Hui. The upper left scene shows him traveling in a sailboat to the kingdom of Wu in southeast China. The two scenes in the center upper right together depict his most famous deed in conjuring up the Buddha's relics in front of Emperor Sun Quan, who then built the Jianchu temple to honor the Buddha. So you see that ray shining, the multicolored light. Here's the Jianchu temple the emperor built to honor the Buddha. The lower scene, in the lower scene, Sun Quan's grandson Sun Hao, who ruled the Wu from 264 to 284, kneels before Kang Sen Hui. The accompanying inscription explains that Sun Hao initially had no faith in Buddhism, but became a devoted follower of the religion after listening to Kang's lectures. A very important gesture I will talk about later here is the emperor kneeling here in front of the monk. Turning to the other side of the cave chapel, we face the mural on the south wall. Again, starting from the west end next to the central niche, we see two familiar pictures which represent the legends of the stone statues that's here in the Tongshan Temple and the golden Buddha in the Chang'an Temple. This one, two stone statues traveled to China by water, and the golden statues became whole again through a series of miraculous events I talked earlier. I won't repeat. So the last frame on this wall, which also concludes the entire narrative cycle, is centered on the relationship between Master Tan Yan and Emperor Wen of the Sui Dynasty. It is recorded that this emperor was brought up in a monastery and was a devoted Buddhist from early on. After ascending the throne and uniting the country, he became one of the greatest Buddhist monarchs in Chinese history, and was initiated by the monk Tan Yan to practice the 8 precepts. At the lower left of the frame, Tan Yan is being carried to court in an elaborate sedan. The scene next to it illustrates a single event explained in a lengthy inscription which accompanies these images. I read this inscription. In the 6th year of the Kaifeng reign, the whole country suffered from a drought. Divinations to gods received no responses. The emperor asked Master Tan Yan whether he had made any mistake in ruling the country which caused this calamity. The master then initiated the emperor to take the 8 precepts in the Taixing Palace. Consequently, the wind and rain resumed their normal order throughout the country. That's the inscription. Next to this inscription, Emperor Sui followed Emperor Wen of the Sui, followed by his queen and attendants, approaches Tan Yan with his inquiry. The scene to the upper left shows the emperor kneeling humbly as a disciple, receiving initiation from the monk, who is seated high up on tall dais in a hall. Thick clouds gather above the scene, indicating heaven's response to the emperor's good deed. The clouds extend over the scene to the right, where a large stupa sends out a multicolored light. Tan Yan is again seated on a tall dais in front of Emperor Wen, who takes the lower seat while clasping his hands. The most dominant position is echoed by the accompanying inscription, which reads, Master Yan lectures on Parinirvana Sutra for Emperor Wen in front of a stupa, and is completing his commentaries and discourse on the sutra, stimulating the stupa to emit light for 3 days. Unquote. The dynastic chronological structure of the 2 murals is beyond doubt. The pictorial narrative starts from the Western Han in the 2nd century BCE and ends at the Sui in the late 6th century CE, with the images in between representing historical figures and events during the Wu, the later Zhao, the Western Jin, and the Eastern Jin dynasties. This linear dynastic time leads to the moment of the present, symbolized by the Buddha statue in the central niche. Unfortunately, the original statue in this position is missing. Scholars agree that the current statue was put there later. Based on the sculpted mountains in the niche and trees on the back wall, basically, based on those are all sculpted mountains. Everywhere is mountain. It's still there. These mountains are from Han Dynasty. Those statues were added later. So based on these mountain images and also some traces on the back walls, I have proposed that the original icon in this position should have been a standing image situated in mountainous environment. The only such image at Dunhuang is that of the Fanhe Buddha, introduced earlier in this talk, described by Thomas Yuen. Also known as the miraculous images of Liangzhou, this icon appears in cave 203 and 300 at Dunhuang as three-dimensional images. In these two caves, the Fanhe Buddha is presented as the main image in the central niche. Dense layers of mountain cracks surrounded the statue, which seem to have just thrust it out of a cliff. Integrated into the pictorial program of Cave 223, this icon acquires a richer and more complex meaning when combined with the historical narratives on the two walls. We have assumed that's still assumption. I feel right now most people believe originally the icon should be this particular icon surrounded by the mountains. So in this position, it can be read together with the historical narratives on the two walls. I just mentioned that the narrative paintings on the walls show a clear dynastic sequence starting from the Han and ending at the Sui. To those living in the 7th century during the Tang Dynasty, these paintings on the walls, these painted passages on the walls depicted bygone history. Whereas the Fanhe Buddha in the central niche represented the present Tang Empire. The statue could possess this significance because, first of all, it was a native miraculous icon that originated in North China and hence differed from all imported foreign icons portrayed on the side walls. This explains why in Dao Xuan's narrative cited earlier, this statue is connected to and only connected to a series of northern regimes. Among these regimes, the Northern Wei and Northern Zhou lost their opportunity to unite the country, so the statue remained damaged. It became and stayed complete once the Sui and Tang rulers unified the country. This self-congratulating attitude and the dynastic sequencing of the historical narrative seems to imply the point of view of the ruling political regime authority. But if this is true to some extent, it's really support the political authority, the murals are not simply political propaganda because they also challenge the dominance of political authority. What deserves special notice is the hierarchical relationship between eminent monks and the secular monarchs. Sun Hao and Emperor Wen kneel in front of Kang Zhenghui and Tan Yan, clearly demonstrating the superiority of religious power over secular political might. Considering the heated debate in the early Tang about whether monks should pay homage to kings, these images undoubtedly represent the views of the Sangha. The murals also depict the moments when eminent monks initiate secular rulers into the Buddhist faith and emphasize how such conversions benefited the whole country. Thus, although these images are shaped as a dynastic narrative, they also deliver the idea that the fate of any emperor depends on his faith in Buddhism. To this end, the Fanhe statue in the central niche not only celebrated the victory of the Tang in unifying the country, but also delivered a warning, for it would become incomplete again if the world collapsed into chaos by falling into the wrong hands of divisive political leaders. I will end here. Thank you. Any comments, questions? Yes, please.
The narrative you just mentioned reminds me of a story about the ancient bronze theme.
Yes.
The story that you mentioned in one of your books. Do you think there is any connections between this kind of narrative and the ancient one of the bronze theme?
Right. So the story she mentioned is this story came from like a 4th century BCE text about the ancient Chinese tripods. So there was this set of divine tripod created by the creator of China. Then after the first dynasty, the tripod again disappeared and moved to the capital of the next dynasty. Then basically predicted the political course. I feel you're totally right. The link by this pattern, this dynastic history become like a narrative structure. There's many similar stories, like a mural, also travel around, and other things. I think. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, please.
So I have a question about the story that you related in the slide right after the Yukang about the statue that is thrust out from the mountain with his head missing. And it strikes me that this motif is actually prevalent in Buddhist history. You have, on the one hand, it's said that Nagarjuna gained realization upon seeing his two friends beheaded on Sraj. Later in the Sharanga Sutra, there's a famous parable about a poor sap named Yashnadatta who wakes up one morning, looks into the mirror, falls in love with the image he sees there, notices that it's got a great head on its shoulders, and all of a sudden it goes mad at the thought that he himself hasn't a head at all. And then Lindsay later says about this very parable that the only way that Yashnadatta could have cured himself of his madness is to stop searching outside, that he can shine his own light upon himself.
Interesting.
So I wonder what you make of this predominant motif throughout the history of Buddhism of losing one's head and finding it again in unexpected places.
Right. I feel it's again, this is almost in India. We see this in Central Asia tales or China. So it's really a very common kind of, you say, it's almost allegorical. It's always something wrong with it, right? It's any body parts, there are other things. So I feel for me it's still people embrace this kind of very simple thing just because of the different implications. although the sign saying the head missing or some implications different. Here you can see so political in China, everything dynasty, everything dynasty. In your case, maybe different, maybe something about the inner nature, about other things. So there's many, many implications based on history, based on culture, based on community, whatever. But they seem to share this the language. Yeah. Yes, please.
In addition to the periodic loss of heads, the one statue is also unable to be measured accurately. And I wondered if you could elaborate a little on that motif.
So the lost head.
Yeah, it's roughly 18 feet, but every time they try to measure, they can't. And I wondered if there are other examples of that, or if there's an interpretation of that immeasurability.
Yes, yes. That's again actually mentioned many times in relation to these kind of miraculous icons. But basically, they are not really just a fixed object. They have their own life, they have their own wisdom, they have their own subjectivity, so they cannot be measured by human. In Dunhuang, actually, there's a large mural about this, the story of this icon. I don't have time to talk about it. There's a little image, two craftsmen, one try to use a yardstick to measure it, the other person try to pen, but just shows a human. When you deal with the miraculous icon, you can make a copy, but the copy is just a copy. So this true origin, true model is beyond our reach. So this information is constantly being delivered in story and in pictures. Yeah, I think that's very good detail.
I actually like to ask a very similar question.
Yeah.
Because it seems to point to the many different registers of meaning of these objects. Because in the idea of the integral statue is the integral kingdom, that's one form of analogy between the object and the kingdom.
Right.
And if you think that there are probably analogies between the object and the kingdom and every part of it that's described, what is the analogy to politics in the constantly changing immeasurableness? That was the same, the question that provoked me. Given how powerful a representation of politics these statues are, does that have political implications? Is there something to be drawn from that or not?
I feel there are a lot of things here. But here the story I feel is very interesting. Basically, both accounts by Hui Jiao and Dao Qian are sort of retrospective. It's talking about the past events. I sort of want to imagine, like in this cave, contemporary people, when they went there and see this thing, knowing the story in the past, probably they were watching for some signs. So if the Buddha looks sad or the part of pants is missing, the head missing, probably that's really the end of it. Maybe before that is sweat. There's many other things. There are footprints. There are stories. So Buddha walked at the night, the statue. So all these things could tell people something. Maybe minor political events, negotiation, even local events, but this head missing seems really about dynasty. It's a major change of. But it's an interesting idea, just how to respond to politics and dynamic.
But in that case,
I invite you all
downstairs to the common room where we will have a reception in honor of our speaker and in honor of the 2 Alumni Citation Award winners who we will announce and award. at the reception. So please join us downstairs. Thanks again.